In today's Reddit story, we have a young man who wants to go above and beyond for his partner, even after she betrayed his trust numerous times. It's not until she nearly ends his story that he figures it'd be better off for them to divorce. What happens to his partner after they break up is the real reason he wrote this story. If you want to know how things turned out in this hectic relationship, get yourself a coffee and grab a bowl of popcorn so we can get into it.
I married my soon-to-be ex-wife, Val, in January of 2020. I was 22 years old at the time, and she was 21. We got married in secret, so only our close friends knew. At this time, we were living on campus at a university in Miami, and we both came from 2 counties away, which is where our families lived too. As soon as we got married, it was a toxic nightmare. For starters, she was secretly texting her ex-boyfriend from high school, who we'll call Darren. She said they were just friends now, but this didn't sit right with me, because he was the guy who took her virginity. I'm not the type of person to go into someone's phone because I wanted to trust her. However, she was trying her best to hide her screen from my point of view, and whenever I touched her phone, she went crazy. At some point, I was able to figure out her passcode and check her messages. However, I wasn't able to find any proof of her cheating. Fast forward to March of 2020, the pandemic hits, and everyone's forced to move back home. We were in a weird position because we still hadn't told our families that we were married, so we wore our rings in secret. Everything was seemingly okay until the first week of April. That's when she randomly said that she wanted a divorce. It shattered my heart to hear that, and I cried, begging her to stay. I tried to find out where I went wrong or if there was something I wasn't doing for her. She responded by saying that she just didn't love me anymore, and that she wasn't the one for me. For about a week, I tried my best to save our marriage. I was at her mercy, trying to make things work, but she's extremely stubborn. At the end of that rough week, I finally accepted that she didn't want to be with me. It was hard to accept, but I figured we shouldn't drag it out anymore. I only asked her to return the wedding rings I gave her, but she refused to give them back, saying they were a gift for her, and she's entitled to keep them. Legally speaking, she may have been right, but I didn't feel like she deserved to keep them because we were no longer going to be together. The rings were real, and I was on a payment plan for about 3 years, and I was only 4 months in so far. We argued about this over the phone, to the point I hung up and cried in bed. My mother asked what was going on. I confessed everything to her, and she held me in her arms and told me everything was going to be okay. The next day we both went to Val's home where we confronted her mother and told the truth about what happened. Our mothers started to argue with Val still upstairs, refusing to see me but was texting me, asking me what the hell was going on. Eventually, her mother agreed to the rings being given back to me, but it had to be done on another day. About 2 days later, I get a call from Val while I was at work. She was crying, saying her mother was kicking her out because she got married in secret. She said she still loved me and was willing to give us another try. Agreeing to cut Darren off completely, she said we should move in together and live as a married couple. Being the idiot I am, I rushed out of work to meet her, and we immediately started looking into apartments in the area. I was able to get us an apartment that was fairly cheap due to the pandemic, and the move-in date was within 3 days. When I got home, I told my parents the news, and my mother wasn't happy about it. She said I was making a mistake and that I need to rethink all this. My father was disappointed too, but said it's my life, my choice. For the next few days, my friends helped me move my things from my place, and I barely talked to my parents. It was heartbreaking for my mother the most, and it hurt me to see my mother so upset. On the first day of us moving in, I felt like our marriage was heading in the right direction. I was finally feeling that happiness I felt before she told me she wanted a divorce. However, that happiness didn't last long. A few weeks after moving in, we were invited out for some drinks, and when we got home, I went through her phone and found conversations between her and a different ex. We'll call him Chris. The messages went all the way back to when Val wanted a divorce. My legs crumbled. She was passed out on the bed, but I woke her up by splashing water on her, and I started screaming. She was confused because she was still tipsy, but I was furious and yelled at her for 2 to 3 hours. At one point, I demanded that she leave. As she started to come back to her senses, she began swinging at me and chasing me around the apartment. She actually punched me a few times and clawed at me. I'm not a violent person, so I took the abuse and locked myself in a room to keep her away from me. She started crying, begging me to forgive her, She was even on her knees, saying she'd do anything to make up for it. We began arguing and then slowly started talking about the situation through the bedroom door. Eventually, we both calmed down and went to bed. I didn't sleep, and at 7 a.m. she woke up, only remembering half of what happened during the night. I yelled everything at her again, but this time she was sober enough to know what was going on, and again pleaded for me to stay. She cried, saying she had nowhere to go. In that moment, I hated her very much, and I felt like she stole me from my family, my friends, and my life. About what I saw in the messages, there was nothing that stated they did anything physical, but there were conversations in which the sexual tension was running high. She was calling him sexy, and he suggested that they should make a video together, which I considered cheating. After some more arguing, I told her that as long as she promises nothing happened between her and Chris, and promises to not talk with him again, I'll stay. Otherwise, I'm gone. She was adamant that nothing ever happened, but during that same conversation, I asked if anything had happened between her and Darren. She paused and said no. It was in that moment that I wanted to investigate things further. My gut told me that this was only the beginning of what was to come, and that she'll likely turn my world upside down. Anyway, we're now in June of 2020, weeks after the incident. At this point, I'm keeping my distance from her, keeping my same work routine, while trying to finish my college classes online. She wasn't working yet, but whenever I came home, it was never clean, unless I did it. Around this time, she also adopted a mini golden doodle, but when we moved in, I brought my Malshi, who she loved, until the golden doodle came. After that, she gave my Malshi the cold shoulder. For the next few months, it was nothing but the same routine. We tried to talk and go out on dates, but it always ended in silence. I tried to break the ice, to see if we can work it out, but she never wanted to express herself. Little by little, I felt my love for her going away, and I became numb to her treatment towards me. This lasted until October of 2020, when she finally opened up to me and apologized for how she treated me during the last few months. We felt like we were both ready to leave the past behind so we could focus on the present. It was us against the world. This felt more powerful when I caught COVID the following month, because she cared for me the way a wife should. She ended up catching it from me once I recovered, and I returned the favor. After that, we started acting more like husband and wife, and she finally started getting into my hobbies such as video games, anime, art, and photography. She even came along with me during my late-night deliveries, where we would vibe to music. We discovered new things about each other and went on dates. Honestly, it was heartwarming to be in her presence again. The spark between us was finally coming back, but I still had a secret grudge because it was hard to move on from her actions. All was good until a few days before Valentine's Day in 2021, which is when I made another discovery. Over the last few months, I was still secretly going through her phone every now and then. But honestly, I never found anything between her and Chris besides what I already knew. However, I decided this time to take it a step further and look at the messages between her and her bestie, who she'd constantly tell all the gossip to via long messages and screenshots. Going through those messages made my heart sink even more as I found out more details about her and Darren. It turns out that Val and Darren slept together a few days before she asked me for a divorce. This was the real reason as to why she wanted to call it quits. As I kept reading, it turns out that Val and Chris had a conversation sometime during October of 2020. Oddly enough, I wasn't surprised. I woke her up from her nap and straight up confronted her about what I read, but my tone was surprisingly calm. She started crying and apologizing about it, and then I stepped out and went for a drive to clear my head. Many dark thoughts were going through my head at that time. I felt like I had nowhere to turn. For the next few days, I avoided her as much as possible. We still slept in the same bed, but there was no physical contact. On Valentine's Day morning, I get a couple of nudges from her in a cutesy tone, asking what I had planned for her. Keep in mind, I'm extremely exhausted from work and my deliveries from the whole week, and obviously I'm still heartbroken. She started crying, saying that I didn't plan anything for her. Once I heard that, I jumped out of bed and started scolding her about how crazy she was to think I'd do anything for her after what I discovered. I yelled, saying that she doesn't deserve anything and how our marriage is a total disaster. Now you may be wondering why I'm still with her. Well, at this point in my life, I honestly didn't have the energy for anything. I was completely blank, a complete 180 from the person I used to be. I used to be creative, I used to draw, paint, do photography and videography, and I was always looking forward to the next adventure. But now I was hollow, not understanding the point of life. I know I'm stupid for this, but I felt like it was just easier to hide from the world. We were already so deep into our marriage that it felt like there was no going back. Because if I did, what would I do? It was a dead end for me, and I blame myself for relying on her to make me happy, despite making me the saddest I've ever been. After this discovery, we again entered another period of keeping our distance from each other. Around April of 2021, she took a trip to Peru with her grandmother. And honestly, I was a little excited to have the place to myself for a change. I told my friends the news, and they began showing up to my place while she was away, not knowing what I know. They made me feel like my old self again, as we got up to our old late-night shenanigans, like having game nights, watching movies, or just hanging out. I loved it. I was happy again, even if it was for a moment. At the same time, the lease on our apartment was up by the end of May 2021, and I'd been speaking to my father about what I could do. That same month, my mother went to Chicago to spend time with family for the rest of the year, and my dad came up with the idea of letting me and Val stay at their home while they were gone. I agreed, but Val wasn't so enthusiastic about it. However, I didn't need her approval. It was either that or pay double to rent somewhere else. I moved back in with my parents in June of 2021. Val was still in Peru, but she'd be coming back in the next few weeks. I finally felt at home again, moving back into my old room, and seeing the layout that represented the spirited youth I once had. I enjoyed my last few weeks of freedom, but I knew this happiness wasn't going to last forever, because Val was finally home. The next part of this story is where things really hit the fan, almost costing me my life. It's now around June or July in 2021, and me and Val are living at my parents' home. I started a new job in sales and was able to advance pretty quickly to a supervisor role within 3 months. The job paid well enough for me to afford my dream car. As for my marriage, it was a steady relationship for the remainder of the year. We had our good and bad moments, but overall I was still quite numb. I didn't know what I felt towards Val, whether it was anger, sadness, or depression. I just felt like our marriage didn't have a purpose. By the start of 2022, there was a bit of a reconciliation between us, enough for us to start going on dates again. We opened up more, but we were still wondering where our marriage stood. Everything was seemingly okay until May of 2022, where my life flashed before my eyes. I invited my friends over for a hangout and to watch boxing at my parents' place. I told Val about it and said how it'll be only for a few hours, and to expect some yelling because we get passionate about sports. She was okay with it. As the fight kept going, we kept getting louder and louder to the point she was angrily texting me to keep the noise down. She would come out to grab snacks or use the bathroom, only to slam the door when she went back to the bedroom. After the fight, one of my friend's truck had a dead battery, so I used my car to jump it. While we were jumping it, the four of us talked for about half an hour. While we were talking, Val demanded me through text to come inside, to which I texted back, "We're finishing up." As I'm just about to head inside, Val storms out of the house and heads to her car. I asked if everything was okay, but she had a very serious look on her face and angrily pushed me aside. My dad had installed some outdoor solar lights in the front yard, and the way Val's car was positioned, her only way out was to go through the grass that had one of the solar lights on. She revved the car, and before she took off, I tried to stop her from running over the light. Again, I asked her what was wrong. She paused for about 5 seconds, then stepped hard on the gas, almost running me over. I jumped out of the way as fast as I could, grazing my knee in the process. Val drove off, dragging the solar light beneath the car, scraping the road. I sat on the ground with a surprised look on my face, thinking how she just almost ran me over. My friends helped me up and asked if I was okay. I looked at them in shock and they offered to help, but I told them to go home, and I went back inside, shaken up from what happened. I kept calling Val's phone to find out why she did what she did. I go into our room and find her phone on the ground, unlocked. I go through her phone for the first time in months, and it turns out there were still secrets to find out about Val. It so happens that Val and Chris had a continuous affair for months, starting in March of 2020 to October of 2020. I finally felt something in my heart and brain. I needed to do something I should have done a long time ago. It was about 2 a.m., and I was still freaking out about the incident. I repeatedly called my sister, who lives down the road from me, but I didn't get a response. Val comes home and tries to get in, but I managed to lock the door with an additional lock. I sneak out through the back and drive over to my sister's house, hyperventilating as Val pursued me. I get to my sister's house and start knocking on the door, but as Val pulled up in the driveway, I began knocking frantically. When my sister and her husband finally opened the door, Val backed off and drove away. I explained the situation to my sister and cried to her about what happened. This is when I finally opened up about how Val cheated on me in the past. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I was ready to finally let this marriage go. I asked her to accompany me back home to make sure Val doesn't try to hurt me again. When we get there, Val was already packing her stuff. I kept my distance for about 5 minutes, then asked her to give me back the rings and the keys. She already expected this, as she had them in her pocket, ready to hand over. She grabbed her suitcase and took our golden doodle with her. My sister and I talked for a bit longer, and then she finally went home. That night was a long one for me. I went to sleep at about 6 a.m., only to be woken up about 7 to Val knocking on the window. She spent the remainder of the night in her car and asked if I could at least let the golden doodle inside. As much as I wanted to, I ignored her, and this went on for about 30 minutes. Later on, I reached out to Val and met up with her to talk about the situation. I finally told her about everything I knew, and decided it would be better for us to separate. She cried and begged me to let us work things out, but I was tired of the emotional and physical abuse, the lies, the heartbreaks, and everything else. As toxic as it sounds, what followed for Val was satisfying. It felt like karma was giving her exactly what she deserved. Val moved back in with her mother, but not for long, because she doesn't get along with her stepfather and has too much pride to be living under her mother's roof. She ends up finding her own place, saying that if I ever wanted to work things out, I was always welcome to move back in with her. My parents came back from Chicago about a week after we separated. Most of the furniture in our bedroom was hers because she made me throw out my bed and drawers and replace them with hers because it looked more classy. Besides the bedroom, we had a couch, table, and kitchen appliances all boxed away in another room in the house. The day she told me she was coming to get her stuff, my father and I left everything out in the driveway but didn't bother to help them move anything into the truck. She brought her mother, stepfather, uncle, and her 2 aunts, who I would say are not physically strong people. Her grandma was also there, mostly to watch, but she helped with the little things. What took my father and I about 30 minutes to move took them 2 to 3 hours to put in a truck. We peeped through the window, having a few drinks, and laughed about how they were struggling, all while they were talking crap about me and my family. I don't know why they included my family, but then again, they're a family who talk bad about everyone and everything. When Val moved into her apartment, she got a job in her field of study. The job paid well by the hour, but she didn't get enough hours. She had too much pride to work a second job, as she felt like it was beneath her. Because of this, she struggled to keep up with her rent, electricity, water bill, car payments, and insurance. She reached out to me a few times asking for money, but I refused to help her. I felt like her financial problems had nothing to do with me. Val would try to gaslight me to give her money, saying that I shouldn't let our golden doodle suffer with her, so I told her to ask her lover for money. I was surprised to learn later on that she told her mother the truth, and her mother took my side, saying she wouldn't be giving her money either. The rest of her family still hated me for not wanting to work it out after she cheated, but their opinions don't matter because none of them are married themselves. Months went by, and we were still legally married. Val agreed to go half on the divorce fees but didn't have the money. During these discussions, she admitted that she still had hope for us to work things out because she still had love for me and believed I still loved her. Call me stupid, but I did love her. But I knew I couldn't keep playing this game. Despite everything she's done to me, it was still hard for me to hate her. This is someone I've grown close to since high school. She helped me when I was at my lowest point in life and made me happier than anyone else ever could. Yet she still managed to break me and make me feel like I'll never be good enough for anyone. We still have each other on social media, and even though she claims to be struggling with money, she always seems to be out clubbing on the weekend. This usually ends up with her drunk texting or calling me, saying she was wrong for how she treated me. Whenever I post on my Instagram or Snapchat about being out late at night, she's usually the first to see my posts, and it's usually within a minute. She acknowledges that I look happier without her. And as of now, I wouldn't say I'm happy, but I feel free. Since moving out, she's had 2 car accidents just a few months apart. We're no longer on the same insurance, but she still called me asking if I can help her financially, which I refused and told her she was on her own. I still had her on my phone plan a few months after, but decided to disconnect her line without letting her know. Once reconnected, she angrily messaged me days later about how she lost her number and had to get a new phone because her current one was still locked in with my carrier. She couldn't call to unlock it since I was the account holder. I couldn't help but laugh. I have this ex-girlfriend, but we ended things on good terms. We were friends until me and Val got married, but Val forced me to end my friendship with her, out of fear that she'd try to get me back. We started hanging out again, and when Val found out, she swears that I only divorced her to get back with my ex. I had no interest in my ex after the breakup. Even now, I only see her as a friend. From what I heard from a mutual friend, Val tried to get back with Chris, but he has a girlfriend and child. She also tried to start things up with Darren, but he also has a girlfriend. Val would sometimes reach out to me about how she's behind on certain bills, would barely eat, almost got evicted, and can't afford to care for the golden doodle. If I had to guess, she's most likely getting money from her grandmother. We would still text from time to time to figure out a court date, or days where I still had to give her some leftover stuff from the house. She always says that she'll never find a guy like me, and how much she wishes we could try again. This sort of made me feel happy, but a part of me is also sad because of how it all went down. Around March of 2023, we went to court to file our divorce. While waiting our turn, she stepped out into the hall to cry her eyes out, while I sat there not knowing what to think. After about 10 minutes, it was finally our turn, and we began signing away. Ever since then, we only message each other once or twice every few weeks. As for myself, I was promoted to manager a month after we separated, and I stayed in that position until November of 2022, as I was overworked to the point of getting no sleep. I was able to find a better paying job, and I'm still there. During my marriage, I gained weight from overeating to help cope with my depression, but I've been going back to the gym. Still, I need to work on getting a routine. I wouldn't say my life is perfect, but whenever I'm having a bad day, I think about how Val's life is basically falling apart. Finally, she can feel what I felt for over 6 years. I know I'm terrible for thinking this way, but at least my life's heading in the right direction.
That was a lot to take in. While there's a lot I could say about this situation, I'll leave it for you guys to discuss in the comments. But I will say this. All this could have been avoided if OP followed his gut to begin with, and called it quits when things went wrong the first time. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Coffee and Popcorn, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.